What's the scariest thing that you've seen, but no one believes you? Story 1: The last night with my stepmom. It was the night before my stepmom passed away after a long battle with cancer. I was 22 at the time, and I spent the night in bed with my 9-year-old half-brother. I held him close, telling him that his mom was going to be okay, that she wouldn't be in pain anymore. It was about 3 a.m., and we were lying there, trying to find comfort in each other's presence. Suddenly, my little brother sat up, smiling. I looked at him, wondering what was going on. "I promised to be a good boy, Mommy." "I love you," he said, as though he was speaking to someone who wasn't physically there. It was so innocent and pure, and I could barely keep my emotions in check. He had no idea what was about to happen, and neither did I. But then, for a split second, I saw something, or rather, someone. I swear on my life, and my little brother agrees, that for a brief moment, I saw my stepmom standing in the doorway, dressed in her big, fur coat. She looked relieved, like she had finally found peace. She didn't say a word, but the smile on her face was enough. I couldn't believe my eyes. My brother, just a few minutes later, fell asleep. I decided to leave the room to check on my dad and stepmom. When I walked into their room, my dad was awake, looking exhausted. I asked him how my stepmom was doing, and that's when he told me that she had passed away about half an hour earlier. In that moment, I genuinely believed that my stepmom had stopped by to check on her children before crossing over. It was a strange and powerful experience, one that still stays with me to this day. Story 2: The White Bear in the Rockies. A few years ago, I was hiking through the Rockies when I managed to tear a muscle on the side of my foot. It wasn't the smartest idea to be out there alone, but I was determined to get back to Jasper. As I was limping along, trying to make my way back, I spotted something in the distance. There, sitting in the snow, was what I thought at first was just a bear. But then, I realized it wasn't just any bear, it was a white bear, a spirit bear, sitting calmly and watching me. I thought I was done for. I had been hiking alone, my foot was injured, and there was nowhere to hide. I was certain that this would be the end of the line for me, but to my surprise, the bear didn't attack. It just sat there, pawing at the ground as though it was waiting for something. I kept limping on, my eyes never leaving the creature, and after a few minutes, it was gone. As I kept moving forward, still in shock, I saw something even stranger. A wolf appeared out of nowhere, limping on the same foot I had injured. It stared at me for a few moments before turning and walking off. It was as though nature had sent me a message showing me the way forward, even in my pain. Story 3: The Robbery in South Africa. During my time as a missionary in South Africa, I had one of the creepiest experiences of my life. It was New Year's Eve, and after waking up in the middle of the night to grab a glass of water, I walked into the kitchen. As I was drinking, I turned around to find the front door wide open. I didn't think much of it at first, but I shut it quickly and returned to bed. The next morning, my missionary companion was the first to wake up and notice that the door was open again. That's when we realized that we had been robbed during the night. The intruders had likely been in the house while I was in the kitchen getting water. The feeling of realizing that someone had been in our home, that close to us, still gives me chills. Story 4: The Mysterious Movement in Rural New Jersey. This one's hard to explain, but it's something I'll never forget. It was late, somewhere between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., and I was sitting at an intersection, waiting for the light to turn green. Across from me was a dark road, flanked by thick woods to the left and houses to the right. I was sitting in the car, listening to music when I noticed something moving at the edge of the woods. Now, living in rural New Jersey, I knew that if anything was moving out there, it was either a deer or a bear, neither of which were exactly scary, just annoying if they ran into your car. I turned on my high beams, trying to get a better look, but the light didn't reach far enough. I could see more movement and figured it was just another animal. But then the light turned green, and I drove off without thinking much of it. The next day, as I drove by that intersection again on my way to work, I saw police cars and an ambulance. I asked a co-worker what happened and he told me that they had found dismembered body parts in the woods that morning. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been sitting at that intersection the night before, watching something move in those woods, and now I knew that it was far from an animal. What I saw was far more sinister than I could have imagined. Story 5: The shadowy figure in the haunted house. My friend's grandma's house was right next to a cemetery. He always told me that the house was haunted, and that he had seen strange things there. At the time, I didn't believe him. But one night, when we were over at his house, I saw something that made me question everything. We were hanging out in the living room when I saw something small move across the room, running from the living room through the dining room and into the kitchen. I couldn't believe my eyes. It looked like the figure of a small child, but there was no one there. I turned to my friend, and without hesitation, he asked, "Did you just see that kid run through the house?" I nodded, my heart racing. When we told his grandma about it, she wasn't surprised at all. "Oh, don't worry about it," she said. "It happens all the time." That was when I realized that whatever was haunting that house wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real. After that night, I started believing in ghosts. Story 6: The Haunted Church Experience. One of the scariest experiences I had happened during a trip with my college friends to a town known for its haunted sites. We decided to visit an old church that had a long history of paranormal activity. We arrived there around dusk, and the moment we stepped inside, the air felt heavy, as if something was watching us. The church was abandoned, and the only light came from the flashlight apps on our phones as we ventured deeper into the building. We split into groups to explore different parts of the church, and I found myself walking through a narrow corridor that led to an old stairway. As I ascended, I felt the hair on my neck stand up. My flashlight flickered, and I paused to check it, wondering if it was just the battery. But when I looked up, there was a figure standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I froze. The figure didn't move. It was just a silhouette, but I could feel its presence, like it was waiting for me to make the next move. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stood there, unable to take a step forward or backward. In that moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. I quickly ran back down the stairs, nearly tripping over myself in my panic. When I met up with my friends, I told them what I saw, but no one believed me. They all thought I was just imagining things, trying to freak them out. The next day, one of my friends, who had been recording with his phone, checked the footage. To his surprise, there was a shadow on the video at the top of the stairs, the same spot where I had seen the figure. We all became quiet, looking at each other, realizing that what I saw might not have been in my head after all. That night, we left the church, never to return. I've never experienced anything like that again, and I'll never forget the feeling of someone or something watching me. Story 7: The Deserted Road at Midnight. It was around midnight when I found myself driving alone down a deserted stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. I was on my way back from a late-night job, and there wasn't a car in sight. The headlights of my car cut through the dark, illuminating the empty road ahead. As I drove, I noticed something strange, a figure on the side of the road. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but the closer I got, the more clearly I could see it, a man in tattered clothes, standing motionless, staring at the road. I slowed down, unsure of what to do. As I passed him, I glanced at my rearview mirror to see if he would move. He didn't. He just stood there, staring, motionless. My skin crawled, and I sped up, not wanting to look back again. But then, something even stranger happened. A mile down the road, I saw the same figure, standing by the side again. How could that be? There was no way he could have walked that fast. My heart began to race as I realized something wasn't right. I tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, but the sight of him never left my mind. I made it back to my apartment without further incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something supernatural had happened. Later, I found out that there had been rumors of a hitchhiker ghost on that stretch of road for years, someone who had died in a car accident decades ago. I didn't know what to make of it, but I can't help but wonder if I was lucky enough to have seen that ghost. Story 8: The Haunted Mirror That Won't Let You Go. I was staying with a friend at her family's old house when I first encountered the haunted mirror. The house itself was creepy, with creaky floors and dark, narrow hallways. It was the kind of place where the air always felt a little too cold, no matter how many heaters you turned on. I was staying in one of the guest rooms, and as I unpacked, I noticed a large old mirror hanging above the dresser. It wasn't anything particularly remarkable at first glance, but there was something off about it. The reflection didn't look quite right. It was as though there was a layer of mist or fog over the glass. I thought it was just a trick of the lighting and didn't think much more of it. That night, I lay in bed, trying to fall asleep, but I kept hearing faint tapping noises coming from the direction of the mirror. I told myself it was the wind or something, but the sound persisted, almost as if someone was knocking gently on the glass. Curious, I got up to inspect it. The moment I stood in front of the mirror, I felt a cold rush of air that made me shiver. I leaned in closer, and to my horror, I could see faint shapes in the reflection, figures that weren't there when I looked away. There was a shadowy outline of a person in the mirror, but when I turned around, the room was empty. I froze in place, unable to move, as the tapping grew louder. I quickly backed away, and the noise stopped. The next morning, I asked my friend if anything strange had ever happened with that mirror. She turned pale and told me that it had belonged to her great-grandmother, who was known for her dark and mysterious beliefs. The family had always warned her never to look into it at night. They believed the mirror held something evil, something that could attach itself to anyone who gazed too long into it. I didn't stick around to find out. I left the house that day, and I never went back to visit again. I can't explain what happened, but I know I won't ever look into an old mirror the same way again. Story 9, The Shadow in the Corner of My Room. I was 17 when this happened, living in a small town in the Midwest. My house had always been a little creaky, but nothing too unsettling until one night. I was lying in bed, drifting off to sleep, when I saw it. It wasn't a person, but it sure looked like one. There, standing in the corner of my room, was a tall, shadowy figure. It was dark, featureless, and seemed to be watching me. I tried to blink it away, but when I opened my eyes again, it was still there. My heart raced as I pulled the covers over my head, hoping it would disappear. I stayed there, trembling, for what felt like hours. I didn't want to open my eyes again, but I couldn't help myself. When I finally did, the figure was gone, but I could still feel its presence. Something had been in my room, and it wasn't a trick of the light or my imagination. The next day, I told my parents, but they laughed it off. It was probably just a dream, sweetie, they said, brushing it aside. But the feeling didn't leave me. For weeks, I slept with the lights on, too afraid to let the darkness overtake me again. It wasn't until years later, when I visited my childhood home, that I finally understood what had been happening. The corner where the shadow had stood? It was where the previous owner had passed away, alone in his bed. I was never told about it until I was much older, but it gave me the chills to know that I had been sharing my room with someone who wasn't alive. As I look back on these experiences, I realize one thing: the unknown is often far scarier than the things we can see and explain. We all encounter strange occurrences in our lives, moments that defy logic and reason, and sometimes, they stay with us forever. The stories I've shared, of shadows, of eerie figures, and of unsettling feelings, are not just about ghosts or supernatural events. They are reminders of the mysteries that exist in the world around us, the forces we can't always explain. What makes these experiences so powerful is that they force us to confront our own fears. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing control. In those moments, when I saw the shadowy figures or felt the presence of something I couldn't understand, it wasn't just the fear of the unknown that terrified me, it was the realization that sometimes, we're powerless in the face of things we can't control. But what's truly fascinating about these experiences is how they shape us. Each story taught me something about my own strength, about resilience, and about the need to trust myself, even when I don't have all the answers. In every encounter, I was forced to confront my own vulnerability and come out the other side with a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. In the end, it's the stories we carry with us, those that linger in the back of our minds long after the moment has passed, that shape our sense of reality. The scariest things I've seen weren't always the most obvious or terrifying on the surface. They were the things that lingered long after, the things that changed the way I viewed the world. And maybe that's the true horror, that once we've seen the unknown, we can never go back to being the same. Maybe we'll never fully understand everything we experience. Maybe some things will always remain just beyond our grasp, hidden in the shadows. But the power of these experiences lies not in the fear they evoke, but in the way they remind us of our own capacity for strength and survival. They teach us to embrace the unknown, to face our fears head on, and to trust that even in the scariest of moments, we are never truly alone.